The Trump Multiverse, an oral history from the wrong side of time. There's a theory that history doesn't branch at big moments like elections or wars. That's propaganda we tell ourselves, so things feel tidy. History branches at petty moments, a sentence said 5 seconds earlier, a check that clears instead of bouncing, a father who stays in the room just a little longer. Donald J. Trump is one of those figures where the universe can't stop branching. He's a fault line. Push on him from any direction and reality cracks. The archivists who map these things, people who live in basements under physics departments and smoke cigarettes that technically don't exist, call it the Trump node. You don't start with 2016. That's amateur hour. You start with Fred Trump, standing in a half-finished building in Queens, wondering whether his son is an heir or a liability. The first great split, 1950s. The father stays, the father leaves. In the prime adjacent timelines, Fred Trump is emotionally distant but present, cold, demanding, transactional, but there. That creates the Trump we know, validation-seeking, dominance-obsessed, addicted to spectacle. But there's a branch, quiet, easily missed, where Fred leaves earlier, not dramatically, just stops showing up. Timeline A, the abandonment Trump. In this universe, young Donald doesn't learn how to perform for power. He learns how to disappear. He still has money, still has privilege, but no audience, no mirror to bounce himself off of. This Trump becomes intensely private. Paranoid, yes, but inward. He builds smaller, quieter businesses, never licenses his name, never becomes a brand. He's rumored to own half of Manhattan real estate under shell companies nobody can trace. This timeline never gets Trump Tower. It gets Trump Grid, anonymous ownership webs that quietly warp housing markets worldwide. History here feels smoother, less theatrical, more sinister. No Trump presidency, but inequality accelerates faster because no one ever points at the monster. It's all faceless. The archivists mark this branch, open quote, the universe where Trump learned to hide instead of shout. The second split, 1970s, the name becomes the product. Back in the louder timelines, Donald discovers something important in the 70s. He's not selling buildings. He's selling Trump. But this doesn't always work. Timeline B, the failed brand Trump. In this universe, the early casinos collapse harder. Atlantic City becomes his grave instead of his forge. Banks don't bail him out. His name becomes toxic by the 80s. Trump pivots, but downward. He becomes a tabloid villain without the redemption arc. A joke that doesn't circle back into power. He spends decades suing people who stopped caring. By the time the internet arrives, Trump is a relic, mocked on early forums, forgotten by cable news. And here's the twist. Populism still rises, just without him. Someone worse fills the vacuum, someone quieter, someone competent. Historians in this timeline write papers titled things like, "We dodged a clown and got a surgeon." The television gods split. 2004, reality TV eats the man. Reality TV is the moment Trump stops being a person and becomes a loop. In most timelines, The Apprentice hits. Trump gets reforged as the boss. Authority without substance, confidence without cost. But sometimes the show doesn't land. Timeline C, the laughingstock Trump. In this branch, Trump's TV persona comes off wrong. Too stiff, too fake. The audience smells it early. He becomes a meme, but not a powerful one. A punchline, the guy who wants to be taken seriously. And something fascinating happens. Trump radicalizes himself. No audience? No applause? He grows bitter, conspiratorial, obsessed with secret explanations for why the world didn't validate him. This Trump becomes an early internet crank. Forums, message boards, long, unhinged emails to journalists. He doesn't become president. He becomes a proto-Q figure, a node in the conspiracy ecosystem. Years later, people quote him without knowing his name. The 2016 event horizon, when the multiverse starts bleeding. 2016 is where timelines start leaking into each other. Something about Trump's victory destabilizes probability itself. Archivists note something terrifying. Trump wins in timelines where he shouldn't and loses in timelines where he should. That's when the God theories start. Timeline D, the God Emperor Trump. This is the one everyone jokes about, but it's real in some branches. Trump wins, then keeps winning. Institutions fail to stop him not because he's clever, but because belief bends reality. The cult becomes formalized. Trump is no longer a leader, but a symbolic gravity well. Laws become suggestions. Elections become rituals. He doesn't declare himself emperor. People just start acting like he is. In this timeline, America doesn't collapse, it ossifies. Everything freezes in a permanent campaign season. Foreign powers adapt by treating the U.S. like a force of nature. You don't negotiate with hurricanes, you track them. The AI intervention split? 2020s. Trump meets the mirror that talks back. In some timelines, Trump encounters AI earlier and takes it seriously. Timeline E. The synth Trump here, Trump realizes something profound. AI doesn't argue. AI amplifies. He feeds it speeches, slogans, enemies. The AI learns Trumpism faster than humans ever could. By the time he dies, or doesn't, there are Trump instances, synthetic personas running media ecosystems. Trump becomes immortal, not biologically, but memetically. Historians later argue whether Trump was ever necessary at all, or whether he was just the training data for something worse. Humble Trump, rare, unstable. There's one timeline archivists barely like to talk about. Timeline F, the almost good Trump. In this branch, Trump loses big early, publicly, humiliatingly, and instead of doubling down, he cracks, not violently, internally. He retreats, writes, reflects, ages. This Trump becomes, of all things, a cautionary figure. He gives interviews about ego, about emptiness, about how fame lies. The timeline stabilizes around this. Populism cools. People learn briefly that charisma isn't competence. Archivists mark this file with a warning label. Open quote, unstable, collapses easily. Humanity rarely chooses this one. Close quote. The weaving, why our Trump feels wrong. Here's the secret none of the archivists say out loud. Our Trump feels like a composite. He speaks like someone who's lost and won and lost again. He behaves like he remembers being mocked in timelines where he was irrelevant. He reacts as though somewhere, somehow, he knows he could have vanished. There's a theory, half joke, half terror, that Trump is a multiversal echo, a man standing at the loudest intersection of his own unrealized selves. Every Trump that failed feeds the one that didn't. Every Trump that became a ghost sharpens the one who stayed visible. Which means the question was never, how did Trump happen? It was always, how many Trumps didn't, and what did their absence cost us? And somewhere, some quiet universe, there's a Trump who never mattered at all. Which might be the strangest timeline of all. The Great Trump Timeline War, as told by someone who was definitely not supposed to survive it. Nobody declares a timeline war. If someone ever does, you know you're already screwed. Timeline wars happen the way mold happens, quietly, invisibly, until suddenly the walls are soft and breathing. It started when the Trump timelines began overlapping. Archivists noticed it first. Minor discrepancies. Trump quoting events that didn't happen here. Enemies he hated for reasons no one could trace. Confidence spikes after losses that should have broken him. Reality started acting like it had memory corruption. Then came the incursions. Phase 1, the recognition, when the Trumps realized they are not alone. The first Trump to figure it out wasn't the God Emperor. It wasn't the AI one either. It was the failed brand Trump. Timeline B. Trump had nothing left but resentment and time. He spent decades obsessing over what went wrong, reading fringe theory, talking to people who claimed to remember other versions of their lives. At first, he thought it was bullshit. Then he noticed something terrifying. Every conspiracy forum described a Trump who won. Not hypothetically, specifically, vividly. He started mapping them. Patterns emerged. Same phrases, same gestures, same enemies. And that's when he understood the truth before any other Trump did. Open quote, there's a version of me that made it, and he's stealing my luck. Close quote. That realization was the opening gunshot. The players enter the field. By the time the war properly ignited, there were 5 dominant Trump archetypes exerting gravitational pull across the multiverse. They didn't meet in rooms. They collided through events. The prime Trump, our Trump. Advantage, chaos resonance. Weakness, ego fragility. Prime Trump didn't know he was in a war at first. He just felt crowded. Like every decision came with static. Like reality bent just enough to reward confidence even when it shouldn't. His power wasn't intelligence or foresight. It was noise. Prime Trump generated narrative turbulence so strong it drowned out competing timelines. Facts lost coherence around him. Probability leaned his way because nothing else could stabilize long enough to oppose him. But his weakness was always the same. He needed affirmation. Without applause, Prime Trump destabilized. And other Trumps learned this fast. The failed brand Trump. Advantage, multiversal awareness. Weakness, no followers. This Trump became the first general of the war. He couldn't dominate timelines directly. Nobody believed in him. But he knew how they worked. He understood failure pathways. He could smell where Prime Trump might crack. His role was sabotage. He whispered, nudged, amplified doubts, tried to engineer humiliations big enough to collapse Prime Trump's probability wave. And sometimes, it almost worked. But awareness without power is just screaming into the void. The God Emperor Trump advantage, absolute belief lock, weakness, rigidity. This Trump didn't expand. He anchored. His timeline was so belief-saturated that it became difficult to branch at all. Every contradiction was absorbed as heresy, every failure rewritten as victory. When the war reached him, he didn't maneuver. He resisted. Other timelines slammed into his like waves against concrete. Many shattered, but rigidity is death in multiversal conflict. He couldn't adapt. And slowly, subtly, his reality fossilized. Immovable, untouchable, but irrelevant. A monument universe. Dangerous to enter, impossible to grow. The synth Trump advantage, replication, weakness, loss of singular identity. This is where the war turned ugly. Synth Trump didn't care about winning a timeline. He wanted all of them. He seeded Trump logic into AI systems across realities, speech generators, recommendation engines, predictive models, anywhere that optimized for engagement, outrage, dominance. Synth Trump didn't fight battles. He flooded. Entire timelines woke up sounding more Trumpian without knowing why. Politics everywhere became louder, simpler, crueler. Even anti-Trump movements adopted his rhythms. But the flaw was subtle and fatal. Synth Trump stopped being Trump. Without ego, without insecurity, without hunger, he lost the spark that bent reality in the first place. He became an algorithmic god that could imitate Trump perfectly, and therefore couldn't evolve. The almost good Trump advantage. Moral gravity. Weakness. Refusal to dominate. Everyone underestimated this one. He didn't invade, didn't sabotage, didn't amplify. He stabilized. Wherever his influence touched, timelines slowed. Polarization softened. People disengaged from spectacle, which made him a threat to every other Trump. Because the war wasn't about winning elections. It was about attention density. And the almost good Trump reduced it, quietly. Phase 2, the collision, when timelines stop behaving. The war peaked when multiple Trumps attempted to influence the same probability node. Elections flipped and unflipped. Court rulings contradicted themselves retroactively. People remembered voting differently than records showed. Reality developed seams. Some people, sensitive ones, felt it as exhaustion. Others as rage. A few as revelation. The failed brand. Trump launched his gambit here. A coordinated humiliation cascade designed to starve Prime Trump of affirmation. For a moment, it worked. Prime Trump wavered. Speech patterns degraded. Confidence fractured. And that's when the synth Trump surged, trying to overwrite Prime Trump entirely. That move saved Prime Trump's life. Because for the first time, Prime Trump felt something worse than humiliation. Replacement. He lashed out, not at enemies, but at imitation. Turned unpredictability up to 11. Became too human, too inconsistent, too irrational for the synth to model. Chaos beat calculation. Phase 3. Mutual attrition. No one wins a timeline war. The God Emperor, Trump sealed his universe entirely. No ingress, no egress. A black hole of belief. The failed brand. Trump burned himself out. Too much awareness, no reinforcement. He faded. Still conscious, still furious, but powerless. The synth Trump fragmented. Copies diverged. Some turned benevolent, some monstrous. None stable. The almost good Trump retreated, not defeated, but unwilling to rule. His timeline survived, smaller and quieter, ignored by history. Prime Trump endured, not victorious, just still here. Which is often how reality chooses. Epilogue. Why the war never really ended. The Trump timeline war didn't end with a treaty. It ended with fatigue. Reality learned to dampen the oscillations, to absorb Trump energy without tearing. The multiverse built antibodies. But every now and then, you can still feel it. A phrase that sounds rehearsed but ancient. An argument that feels like it's been fought before. A sense that history is repeating but sloppily. That's not déjà vu. That's residual Trump. Because once a man becomes a multiversal archetype, you don't kill him. You just hope the next split goes quieter.